So, this conversation between Sam Tideman and this new guy who's hanging around apparently in what some people call this little corner. I prefer the Jordan Peterson sphere. Has been getting some attention. People came on my chatting stream last night and were asking about it. And so I decided to listen to it. And what can I say? Hey, Nathaniel and Sandy. So Ken Wilber is into integralism. He's the father of integralism, which is one of these bullshit ideas that people in this little corner seem to find interesting. And I was not surprised when Dempsey seemed to be. I think he mentioned he was into Wilber and integralism. Sam did an okay job, and frankly, I mean, he. I mean, the topic is interesting. Dempsey understands the issues well enough to discuss them. I think he fails to comprehend. So there was a little bit period of time I was trying to get post-Platonism or post-nominalist Neoplatonism to be adopted as a way of talking about how we are going to deal with post-modernity. So to explain what we are talking about, modernity is a thing, right? Modernity is something that happened. And it happened during the Enlightenment 500 years ago. And it was greatly influential. And frankly, I think instead of talking about modernity, you could talk about the Protestant Reformation. And the Protestant Reformation / modernity / Enlightenment happened. It had many positive effects in the world, for which I am grateful, because Kol Rahmana Avid, Latav Avid, everything that the merciful has created, he has created for the good. The Roman Empire he created for the good. Christianity and Islam he created for the good. And Protestantism he created for the good. And children's hospitals and cancer and other similar things he created for the good. They have their role in creation because he created them, and so what postmodernism has done is show the flaws of modernity. Well, yeah, modernity is flawed. That's a problem. The solution cannot be a sort of attempt to turn back time. You can't turn back time. You can't go back in time. We can't become pre-moderns, right? There are people who are trying to defend modernity. I think James Lindsay, for example, says that he's trying to defend modernity. I think he still is attempting to defend. Well, he's certainly attempting to defend liberalism, if not modernity. There are people trying to defend Enlightenment, and certainly there are people who try to defend Protestantism. I think it's time. The time of modernity has come, and so the people who criticized modernity, calling themselves postmodernists, there's a little problem there, which is the fact that postmodernism is nothing more than, Laura, wow, if you are here for this, I would love for you to join. You are a voice I greatly respect in these conversations. So if you can join, you're more than welcome to. I realize it's a little bit late over there. So postmodernism isn't an ism. It's a criticism. It's a deconstruction of the problems of modernity. And the question becomes, what do we want to do when we what do we want to do as we move forward? There are people who seem to think of themselves as pre-moderns. I think that's silly. You cannot go back in time. Again and again, I will say this: you cannot go back in time. That is not possible. And to some extent, some people will say we are all postmoderns now. Okay, you can call me postmodern. I don't think you can call me a postmodernist. And then, so Dempsey tries to, so famously, Jordan Peterson criticizes postmodernism, right, by saying that, yes, everyone's grasp of the truth is flawed, but some things are more flawed than others, right? And they're not all equally flawed. And that's part of the problem of postmodernism, is this idea that all things are equally flawed, right? So modernity, really nominalism. So nominalism was the assertion that ideas do not have, and ideals do not have an actual existence in and of themselves. And if you want to understand how that's false, I highly recommend the discussion of Sir Roger Penrose and William Lane Craig on Unbelievable, where Sir Roger Penrose, one of the great astrophysicists and cosmologists alive today, I believe he's still alive. Did he pass? He's up there if he has not passed yet. So Roger Penrose is alive and well. He is 92 years old. May he live to be 120. And unfortunately, that discussion may be a little too dense for most people to understand. It was too dense for me to understand. I actually asked Sam Tideman and Ginger Bill to do a commentary on it, which they did. But instead of bringing the discussion down a level, they took it up a level, and it was like, oh, like that didn't help, guys. But so what puts the lie to the idea of nominalism is the fact that the spirit of geometry, that math itself is functional, right? And So we have nominalism, which tried to in a sense deconstruct the spiritual, and remove meaning and reduce things to the material, and I think Vervaeke refers to it as reductive materialism, and then which for 500 years was defensible, almost defensible, kind of defensible. I don't think it's totally defensible, but and then you have postmodernism, which, I mean, really, when does modernism start falling apart? You could say in the 18th century, but you start having real criticisms of modernism, which then starts being referred to as postmodernism, and which leaves people with all sorts of problems. Now, these are not the problems that it seems Brendan Graham Dempsey had. His problems are other. Apparently, he's been going into Tabor and the historicity of Jesus and who Jesus was, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Which, yeah, I agree with all those historical, with all those historical problems with the Christian story. The Christian story is deeply, deeply flawed, and I would say unsustainable. And no, I'm not just trying to troll you to come and defend Christianity, Laura, but if you wanted to, you could. James Tabor, I think if you are a Protestant, there is a real crisis of faith that is that accompanies the Dead Sea Scrolls and modern historical research. There has to be. And that's why, like James Tabor, I don't think rightfully should be called a Christian these days. I don't think he refers to himself as a Christian anymore. He does call himself a Noahide, and I don't question that idea. His sister apparently converted to Orthodox Judaism, which, I honestly think that if you are a Protestant restorationist, you have two choices. You can become a postmodernist in saying it doesn't matter what is true, which Dempsey doesn't want to say, but he also doesn't want to lose his Christianity, because apparently, like, it was like Christianity or death, right? And you see it with Ayaan Hirsi Ali, right? That she was forced into Christianity, and there are people who feel forced into Christianity because it's Christianity or death, right? And I would say that there is a path into Christianity through Catholicism and Roman Catholicism and Eastern Orthodoxy, which is more sustainable if you are trying to be a Christian, than a Protestant metaphysics and epistemology, given what I mean, archaeology, the Dead Sea Scrolls, what we know scientifically, and I have to just point out, Trey, yesterday in our Just Chatting stream, he fundamentally misunderstood Dempsey's arguments, because it's not that our understanding of history negates the possibility of all miracle. It's that it's not a question of whether or not you believe in miracles that causes a Protestant theology to be incoherent. And I mean, this is the problem of Protestantism, is it is fundamentally incoherent. I would have loved to have Sam here for this, because Sam truly grapples with these things. And the comment I made on his video was, Sam is a treasure, and he is. Or maybe I said a gift, and he is. Because honestly, he seems to be the only. Well, Paul Vanderklay doesn't actually openly apologize. He doesn't even attempt to apologize for Protestantism. And everyone I have invited over and over again to come and defend Protestantism, certainly Calvinism, on my channel. Honestly, I have to say, it's not really defensible. I really don't think it is. Like, if you're full force trying to assail Protestant theology, it's just not defensible. And I understand that Dempsey, with his idea of toggling, is trying to find a way of using a postmodernist trick. And Sam slightly calls him out on it. But not totally. Yeah. Laura says, I was put off by the toggling idea. Yeah, so the toggling idea, unfortunately, Chazi seems to agree with it. And unfortunately, this is how he understands Judaism, unfortunately, which is part of the reason he's a heretic. Love you, Chazi. There's a reason why I talk about a post-nominalist Neoplatonism, because I do believe Neoplatonism is correct. I believe it was always correct, because as I understand Neoplatonism, it is Jewish theology as was taught to Moses on Mount Sinai. And I mean, the main point we can listen to the video and I can do commentary on it, but the main point is, yes, it doesn't matter if Jesus, so he talked about the Talpiot tomb, which is whether it is not, I mean, I don't think anybody really seriously, other than possibly James Tabor, and James Tabor doesn't even say this, believes that Jesus was buried in the Talpiot tomb. That is the mythicist, maximalist, I'm talking about the channel mythicist, not the actual mythicist. Mythicists would say that Jesus didn't have a tomb, that Jesus never existed. But there's the channel mythicist, or the one with Derek, if you know this part of the internet that's a bit larger than this little corner of the internet. Bart Ehrman goes on that channel a lot. The Talpiot tomb I think and Tabor makes a reasonable argument that it is the family tomb of Jesus, right? That and he believes that the James ossuary is the actual ossuary of meaning the basically coffin, but smaller, much smaller, just for the bones after a year of decomposition. Of James the Just, the brother of Jesus. And possibly actually the ossuary of Mary, which I think actually should cause more problems for at least Catholics. So the Talpiot tomb, like it's really there, right? And the idea of, okay, if we were to find out that really Jesus did not walk out of that tomb, right? What does that mean for a Christian? And Dempsey wants to say that through this idea of toggling, you can retain your Christianity without jettisoning the entirety of what modernism brings forth, which is an epistemology which does not flatly deny science. I'm going to do this again because at least Laura's here. Laura actually knows German. As someone who knows German, I'm wondering if you've ever read Rabbi Soloveitchik well, he spoke mostly in Yiddish, but he did write in German as well. I know he wrote his PhD thing in. Yes, I am going to read Note 4, the infamous Note 4, which, if you've heard me read it before, feel free. She has not read Rabbi Soloveitchik in the German. I have not read him even in the Yiddish. My Yiddish is not good enough to read. So Rabbi Yosef Ber Soloveitchik, Zionists will often refer to him as Yosef Dov Soloveitchik, Yosef Ber Soloveitchik, was one of the most prominent and beloved Orthodox rabbis of when did the Rav? So when you refer to the Rav, which Rav is Hebrew for rabbi, and frankly, I mean, so in English, when you say the Rav, right, you are referring to Rabbi Yosef Ber Soloveitchik. He passed away in 1967. He was born in 1903. I believe Halachic Man was written in 1948. And it was published in English in 1983. It is one of the most influential modern writings of Orthodox thought in certainly since World War II, certainly in terms of philosophy. Wow. How you doing?
Hey, I'm good.
So Ryan, what do you want to say?
I don't know. Well, Laura has the wisdom to be like, I don't know if I can contribute to this. I for sure know that I can't, but I'm willing to be a Protestant asking Protestant-style questions from a Protestant perspective if you want to raise
Okay.
a Protestant right now.
So what do you think of all the stuff I said so far?
Okay, well, so I haven't kept up super close with all this. Like, I'm not sure I'm clear on what metamodernism is. I like it as a meme. I like it as a kind of like Raz joke almost, but like I don't understand what it actually is.
Yeah,
I think I agree that we can't just be like, oh well, modernism didn't work, so like let's just like backpedal a little bit. Like things don't work that way.
yeah. So this term metamodernity, I mean, Dempsey tries to come up. It's honestly, it reminded me of Wilbur and integralism. So you know how Ian McGilchrist talks about like um, modernity being very left,
Yeah, right.
right? And left hemisphere thinking of, and frankly, I think of integralism and this attempt of metamodernity to be a very left brain attempt to avoid actual right brain thinking by bullshitting.
Okay.
Um,
What manner of bullshit are we talking about?
I would say similar to really what Marx and Engels did, which is a pseudoscientific, systematic, complete, holistic, like, oh, I have it all figured out. Like, so let me explain integralism.
Okay.
So Ken Wilber has these color. He has a color chart, right? And in his colors, right, he puts all the various bits of human thought, right, and then he declares that because he has it all mapped out, now he's, and I guess the highest color is green or blue or something, right? He's got it all figured out, and everything, like, now I know everything. And it's like, you know nothing. Right? It's like, oh, I have figured out, like,
Well, I mean, okay, so it seems to me that I don't know. One thing we've learned from modernity, as you were saying, is that we can't figure it all out. You know, that's kind of like the whole girdle incompleteness thing, and it's like, what then is our response to that? You know, the postmodernists, it seems like their response was just go, it's all vanity, right? And
right.
the metamodern thing seems to be a project to like recover. Like, no, that doesn't have to be our response. Maybe it's about not trying to figure things out in terms of ideas, in terms of left brain, but like recover, like seeing things primarily as a certain way of being, right? That seems to me to be at least healthier than what modernism was doing, right?
Okay, so let me correct one thing. I've been saying integralist, and apparently Ken Wilber calls himself integral thinking or something. Integral theory. Integralism is something else. Okay. I think that Vervaeke's project of trying to return to Neoplatonism, but updating it with modernity, with the insights of modernity and postmodernity, and that's why is the way to go. And that's why I talk about a postmodernist, a post-nominalist Neoplatonism or post.
Yeah. So would you not characterize Vervaeke's project as a metamodern project?
I think it's not even similar at all. I mean, this idea of toggling is in fact completely um, antithetical to the idea of the most fundamental idea of Neoplatonism, which is an attempt to know the one, that ineffable one, right? So the Neoplatonist believes that there is an ineffable one to which he is trying to. We get the man himself.
Howdy. I'm trying to figure out how these settings work on my phone. How you doing?
Good. How are you?
Pretty good. Long time. We haven't talked in a while.
We have not. Whose fault is that?
The universe.
Oh,
The one.
the one.
The one.
Yes, all plans have been created by the one, and he. If you go away from the browser, we can't see you, Sam. Although you can still hear us.
Why aren't you coming out?
What are you trying to do?
I'm trying to get you in my ears. You're coming out just my regular phone speakers.
That's not optimal when you're the father of two and you have a wife who's probably trying to sleep soon.
I'm the father of three, and a fourth is on the way.
Mazel tov!
Yeah, do not discount or cut me short.
Mazel tov! I am very, very happy to hear there will be more Tidemans in the world.
For the record, it's Tideman, but
Tideman?
Tideman.
Okay. Tideman. Okay, Tideman. When Sam is famous, which I am sure he will be, I have nominated you the new Moses of this little corner.
The new Moses.
Yes.
Can we have someone else who can speak better? I feel like my tongue is very sloppy.
You can choose whoever you want to be your brother who will speak for you. Yeah, so...
what's this thing about toggling, real quick? I was like looking through the search engine to try to understand, like, oscillating between different worldviews. Like, what is this?
Yeah, basically. I mean, I honestly, when I listened to him, I kept on thinking, okay, this is Ian McGilchrist, like somebody trying. This is a left brain attempt to fudge not going with the right brain. Sam, well, he said he'll be back, I think.
But like, it seems like you have to have some. I mean, this is how like healing works with memory. It's like you have to kind of oscillate and kind of find the middle, right? Like,
oh yes, well, okay,
not the middle, but like a unification. Like, there's things that are disparate, and the more you kind of toggle between them, the more you'll make the connections, and then boom, they're connected.
Right. So and this is what McGilchrist would say, and this is what Kabbalistically we would refer to the Ratzova Shov, the back and forth. Not to get too graphic, but the back and forth of intimate relations.
Sure.
Right? Yeah. Which is it requires a movement, right? And so the verse in the Bible, I believe it's from Proverbs, it says, like a candle of God is the soul of man. And just like the fire is constantly trying to escape upwards, right? But has to stay grounded in the wick and fluctuates and flickers, right? Mm-hmm. In a similar way, the soul of the human has to have ascents and descents, has to try to pass over. The word Passover also means to skip, right? Has to skip, and today's Passover, so my mind's on Passover. Has to skip, well, it's Chol HaMoed Passover. I am not on whatever. Okay. I'm just making clear I'm not streaming on Passover itself. So your soul has to jump up and come back into the world. And in a similar way, I think McGilchrist talks about information, like the master sends his emissary, and then the emissary has to bring back to the master, who integrates and again sends out his emissary, right? So there is that, but that's not what he's talking about when he's talking about toggling. He's talking about, he seems to be, at least that's what I understood, of switching, of like deciding, oh, right now I'm going to look this way, and then I'm going to look with the rose-colored glasses on, and then I'm going to take the rose-colored glasses off. And really, he seems to be thinking of the rose-colored glasses as, oh, well, Christianity is that that those shades which allow me to withstand the brightness of the light. And
have you seen Everything All at Once, or what's that movie? It's like this, it's very metamodern, everything all at once, everything all at once, if anybody out there in comment land remembers. And it's like set in the multiverse, and you can switch between different multiverses, and the different multiverses are similar but have their minor differences, and the characters sort of need to learn how to go to as many different multiverses as they can to kind of like everything everywhere all at once. Yes, thank you, Laura. And like, as you go to these different worlds and see different versions of yourself with different permutations, you like slowly learn to integrate all these things into one container that can like handle it all. I think that's sort of kind of what he was going after, with the idea that you learn these different perspectives, and then you learn how to take them on and off, and you have some super meta perspective that has the wisdom, I guess, to know which lens is appropriate at which time, but it still doesn't feel like a very highly integrated form of self.
So, I mean, I talk about the dual magisteria, and I do believe, I mean, again, I have to say, note 4 in the back of Halachic Man, I first typed it out 20 some years ago when I first read the book. I typed it into my live journal, if you remember what that was. And I ended up typing it again into my Facebook, and I'll probably end up typing it into my Twitter. And frankly, I talked about it enough that CW decided to pick up Halachic Man, and apparently a bunch of commentaries to it I didn't know existed. And he told me it deeply affected his ideas. And by the way, we had a book club on Halachic Man on my channel. So if anybody's interested, actually, like, highly recommended. But when
can I read you a quote, Jacob?
Sure.
The most ancient Hebrews in the Bereshit Rabbah, or in the Great Genesis, relate that from the beginning of the world there were the following things: the Messiah, the seed of God's glory, the city of Jerusalem, the Garden of Paradise, the Spirit of the just, the law, and Israel. These 7 things.
Okay.
What's that from?
The Bereshit Rabbah is the Midrash.
Okay, and what exactly is that, and how would Michael Servetus know what it is?
He may have, in fact, had a copy of Bereshit Rabbah. So there was a Catholic printer, Daniel Bomberg, who printed basically all the most fundamental Jewish texts right around the time of Servetus, and he sold them not just to Jews, although almost exclusively Jews bought them. That's actually the KJV was based on Bomberg's Rabbinic Bible. So it is possible that Servetus may have read a commentary which cited it. I mean, I haven't read like all the major Jewish commentary. The Rabbinic Bible is this wide, and it's only the 5 books of Moses. And the so it may have been cited, or he may have had a copy of the Midrash Rabbah. I don't know if the Midrash Rabbah was printed back then. What the Midrash Rabbah is while they were only collected some as late as the 8th or 9th century, I believe the Midrash Rabbah was collected in the 6th century. Midrash Rabbah was it was first printed in 1545 in Venice. The
1545 in Venice would allow for Servetus to get his hands on it when he's writing this book in a few years.
Right, and so it appears that Bereshit Rabbah is 6th century. It was collected between 300 and 500, but what the Midrash is they are collections of rabbinic, what do I even call it? Explanations, maybe, of Judaism. Like it's a lot of stories. It's a lot of it is in narrative form. I mean, it's not authoritative in any way. Famously, during the disputation in Barcelona, Nachmanides was confronted with statements of the Midrash, and he said that no Jew is obligated to believe anything in the Midrash. I think most people think he said that under duress. We certainly don't. There's no authoritative interpretations of anything in the Midrash, and there's certainly a lot of argument over what is authoritative in the Midrash. But like that particular Midrash doesn't sound particularly controversial to me.
Who's Ibn Ezra?
Ibn Ezra was one of the great rabbinic commentaries printed in the Rabbinic Bible.
Okay. And Maimonides, I know. So Servetus seems to know Ibn Ezra, Maimonides super well, and also
I'm pretty sure he must have had a copy. Christians studying the Maimonides Mishneh Torah is rather common. In fact, like all of British law seems to have been based on somebody who studied the Mishneh Torah, British common law. But the Rabbinic Bible, which included Ibn Ezra, is what was most broadly studied by Christians.
Interesting. Reading Servetus is dense. Like, he knows everything. It's crazy. He will jump around from rabbinic commentaries to Neoplatonic philosophers to like medieval Catholic theologians and back, like it is, just a walk in the park.
I have great hope that one day Calvin University will be renamed for the holy martyr Michael Servetus. May God avenge his blood.
Yeah. Honestly, I feel like I wish I could read this with you. I feel like there's half of it that I understand better than you do, and half of it that you'd understand better than I do. And that, yeah.
Well,
You know that it is
if you
the
want to
book.
nix Hank and do a Servetus series with me, I'm up for it.
That would be fun. That would be
Yeah.
fun. It's actually, he's the one who coins the word Trinitarian, which makes sense.
Really?
It's almost like one of those words that you wouldn't need to coin until you thought of yourself differently, right?
I guess. I mean, yeah. I think the Jewish word for Trinitarian is just heretic. But
Yeah.
how? Okay. While I will grant you any diversions, are we going to go back to metamodernity, or did you want to
Sure,
continue?
metamodernity. Where are we at? I'm toggling back to metamodernity.
Yes. So
Well, okay, so Jacob, I was going to bring up like the toggling thing. I mean, in some sense, that's what we're doing with cognition, right? Like the different parts of my body, like I'm not consciously aware of my feet and my hands and my awareness all at the same time, right? But they're all functioning. My awareness shifts to different ones at different times, right?
yes, but he seems to, and the example he gave was, let's say that scientifically, right, somebody were to prove that we found Jesus's bones. He wants to still be able to be Christian. And what I have repeatedly said is, you can give me as many explanations of the Exodus as you like and still maintain it, that are not exactly precisely the fundamentalist explanations, and stay within Orthodox Judaism. But you cannot tell me the Exodus did not happen. If the Exodus did not happen, that would not change the fact I believe in God. It would change the fact that I believe in Judaism.
Right. And that part to me seemed to be taking his lenses example too far.
Yes.
Because it would seeming like he was seeming to break down the rule that like all truth must reconcile.
Laura
the point
agrees it must be true.
Right. To the point where he was saying like different things could be true, even mutually contradictory things in your different lenses, and you just have to be good at toggling. Whereas I would say, I do somewhat agree that like I do put on different lenses or able to toggle perspectives, depending on the setting that I'm in. Or like, okay, I imagine how would a Trinitarian think about this thing or something like that. But there's putting on a lens that you disagree with in sort of an imaginary way to kind of simulate something, but not like saying that that's what you are. But then there's also just like, well, I think about things this way when I'm over here, or But the idea that like he wanted a version of Christianity that was indestructible to historical criticism. Then you have a version of Christianity that is uncorrectable and dissociated from like the world, and that will only divide your psyche in a way that just I can't imagine is ever healthy.
Okay, note 4 is really long. I have read it several times on live streams. I want to subject you to it, Sam, but I don't know if you have the time and patience.
If you've got, I've got like 5 or 10 minutes. How about that?
We'll see how far we get. We'll see what you say. Even though Kierkegaard disagreed with Hegel's philosophy from beginning to end and made it the object of his fierce, stinging attacks, he nevertheless accepted from him the dialectic principle, with many significant changes to be sure. And this concept of the dialectic, which he and Karl Barth introduced into the analysis of the unfolding of the religious consciousness, and this view concerning the antinomic structure of religious experience. Antinomic here, he means having a conflict, not being anti,
not rejecting the law.
Yeah, it's being used in the terms of having conflict within it. Wow, Charlie's showing up. Which was revised and refined by Rudolf Otto in his book, The Idea of the Holy, give the lie to the position that is prevalent nowadays in religious circles, whether in Protestant groups or in American Reform and Conservative Judaism, that the religious experience is of a very simple nature, that is, devoid of the spiritual tortuousness present in the secular cultural consciousness, of psychic upheavals, and of the pangs and torments that are inextricably connected with the development and refinement of man's spiritual personality. This popular ideology contends that the religious experience is tranquil and neatly ordered, tender and delicate. It is an enchanted stream for embittered souls and still waters for troubled spirits. The person who comes in from the field weary, from the battlefield and campaigns of life, from the secular domain, which is filled with doubts and fears, contradictions and refutations, clings to religion as does a baby to its mother, and finds in her lap a shelter for his head, the nest of his forsaken prayers, and there is comforted for his disappointments and tribulations. This idea is partially embedded in the most ancient strata of Christianity, partially rooted in modern pragmatic philosophy, but mainly it stems from practical utilitarian considerations. The advocates of religion wish to exploit the rebellious impulse against knowledge, which surges from time to time in the soul of the man of culture, the yearning to be freed from the bonds of culture, that daughter of knowledge, which weighs heavy on man with its questions, doubts, and problems, and the desire to escape from the turbulence of life to a magical, still, and quiet island, and there to devote oneself to the ideal of naturalness and vitality. This Rousseauian ideology left its stamp on the entire Romantic movement from the beginning of its growth until its final tragic manifestation in the consciousness of contemporary man. Therefore, the representatives of religious communities are inclined to portray religion in a wealth of colors that dazzle the eye, as a poetic Arcadia, a realm of simplicity, wholeness, and tranquility. Most of the sermons of the revivalists are divided in equal measure between depicting the terrors of hellfire and describing the utopian tranquility that religion can bestow upon man. And that which appears in the sermons of these preachers in a primitive, garbled form, at times interwoven with a childish naivete and superficial belief, is refined and purified in the furnace of popular philosophy and theology, and becomes transformed into a universal religious ideology which proclaims, if you wish to acquire tranquility without paying the price of spiritual agonies, turn onto religion. If you wish to achieve a fine psychic equilibrium without having to undergo a slow, gradual personal development, turn onto religion. And if you wish to achieve an instant spiritual wholeness and simplicity that need not be forged out of the struggles and torments of consciousness, turn on to religion. And then in a very sarcastic and bitter rendition of the verse from Genesis, get thee out of thy country, which is filled with anxiety, anguish, and tension, and from thy birthplace, which is so frenzied, raging, and stormy, to the land that is enveloped by the stillness of peace and tranquility, to the Arcadia wherein religion reigns supreme. The leap from the secular world to the religious world could not be simpler and easier. There is no need for a process of transition with all its torments and upheavals. A person can acquire spiritual tranquility in a single moment. Typical of this attitude is the Christian Science movement. It would appear to me that there's no need to explain the self-evident falsity of this ideology. First, the entire romantic aspiration to escape from the domain of knowledge, the rebellion against the authority of objective scientific cognition, which has found its expression in the biologistic philosophies of Bergson, Nietzsche, Spengler, Klages, and their followers, and in the phenomenological, existential, and anti-scientific school of Heidegger and his coterie. And from the midst of which there arose in various forms the sanctification of vitality and intuition, the veneration of instinct, the desire for power, the glorification of the emotional affective life, and the flowing, surging streams of subjectivity, the lavishing of extravagant praise on the Faustian type and the Dionysian personalities, etc., have brought complete chaos and human depravity to the world. And let the events of the present era be proof. He wrote this right after World War II. The individual who frees himself from the rational principle and who casts off the yoke of objective thought will in the end turn destructive and lay waste the entire creative order. Therefore, it is preferable that religion should ally itself with the forces of clear logical cognition, as uniquely exemplified in the scientific method, even though at times the two might clash with one another, rather than pledge its troth to beclouded mysterious ideologies that grope in the dark corners of existence, unaided by the shining light of objective knowledge, and believe that they have penetrated to the secret core of the world. It keeps on going for a while. What do you think?
That's a lot. Who is this guy?
Rabbi Joseph Ber Soloveitchik. He was, let's put it this way, he's referred to as the Rav, and everybody knows who we're talking about.
So he likes Kierkegaard. I mean, if he likes Kierkegaard, he can't be that bad. I don't know. It sounded like he was approving of Kierkegaard mostly. I
don't know. I don't know enough Kierkegaard to know. I mean, I can read the next part, which isn't bad.
So he's like, he's insisting on an emphasis on objective truth and the scientific grasp at it as a way to not venture off into these Dionysian mindsets that are destructive.
Well, I mean, he blames Christianity for like people having this idea of like instantaneous salvation.
And well, I guess they're the idea that the religious sentiment was sort of like soft and kind and sweet and nice.
And he thinks that's complete bullshit. So he may be considered the founder of Yeshiva University and modern Orthodox Judaism. But frankly, the big fight within Orthodoxy is whether the modern Orthodox can claim him as their own or not, despite being made up of his disciples. I would say they've lost their way. He was universally respected within Orthodox Judaism. This essay of his, Halachic Man, is it's more I'm not saying it's widely studied. It's not widely studied, but the Rav is he's one of the giants of Orthodox Judaism. Trey's really excited to get in on this.
I am. So I'm going to guess you guys just ripped Metamodernism, a big one, right? Sam, I heard I watched your stream with T-Jump, and I noticed that you didn't try to make a modernist argument that it happened, but you tried to say that it works. Why did you do that?
I had forgotten about my conversation with T-Jump. I suppose I was trying to do something different with T-Jump that I think was different than what he had heard before from his other Christians. And I'm not trying to be critical of metamodernism at large. I'm not sure if I like BGD's Brendan Graham Dempsey's explanation of it, or his version, or his integration with Christianity, or just his ideas overall. But I think I mean, I was surprised at how much attention that conversation got. I really never know which of my videos are going to spark conversations and which ones aren't. And normally what my guesses often tend to be worse than random chance, which is kind of funny. But I think a lot of people are wanting a label for something that they feel is coming next, and then hoping that that label can provide some clarity and direction going forward. And I suppose that that's why people are excited about this meta-modern word. But I think things are just still too in flux. The baby's not born yet.
You don't like post-Platonism? I thought it was a great term.
Post-Platonism?
Well, I got it from Vervaeke. He talks about a post-nominalist Neoplatonism. And I figured post-Platonism is shorter.
I'd prefer a word that isn't like post or meta or pre or proto. That just is like one word that just like is kind of like its own thing. I feel like that's how we'll know when we have the right word, is when we don't need to reference something else.
I have the word.
Okay.
Torah.
Mm-hmm. Well.
Seems perfect. Yeah?
Maybe not. I want to hear more what Trey thought about that conversation.
I mean, I think that, like, rather than going through metamodernism, I think you just need to say, like, I want my, because I left a comment, I think, on one of them, and I think you would agree with two different things. So I think what is it, Brendan? How do you say his full name?
Brendan Graham Dempsey.
Brendan Graham Dempsey. I think that if he didn't ask all of Christianity to force through that lens, that'd be different. Because what if he is saying is, here's how, like, a someone who was in the church, who is no longer in the church, this is how you can make Christianity work. I think we would all approach that in a different way, because, we're sort of coming at him with pitchforks, but we didn't come at Peterson with pitchforks, and he's doing the same exact thing. But, like, Peterson isn't asking everybody to be this sort of, it's not real type stuff.
Is everybody coming at Brendan with pitchforks? I mean, my comments section wasn't particularly nice to him, but I haven't paid super close attention to all the other parts of this little corner that he's been in and how he's been received. But is the general feeling pitchforks?
I mean, like, you can check out the comments under PVK's videos, and he made like 2 response videos because he kept getting comments. And people checked out his channel, and he explained, like, yeah, I don't think Christ was raised, but I'm going to be a Christian. He's like, okay, now I need to make a response video to that, because you guys are... So every time he says, like, I don't think Christ was raised, he gets like 100 comments.
Fair enough.
I mean, if you don't believe that Jesus was raised, then you should stop being a Christian.
Okay, why is it
Jacob agreeing with the Apostle Paul, per usual?
Yeah, but so many atheists put up Christmas trees.
Yeah, that's what makes them have cognitive dissonance and hate their lives.
Do you think it's that?
That is part of their cognitive dissonance, right? If you believe that Jesus did not rise, right, then become a Noahide and be done with it.
Okay, great.
I will gladly accept you into the fold of the Noahide.
Everyone over 30 is already a Noahide, so that's a side point.
What?
That's once you're 30, right? You're not like wilding out. You got a wife. You're sort of doing the whole thing. You know, you're not doing any practices. That's for another
No.
conversation.
A muscular Noahidism.
Yeah, they don't exist. Anyways,
Yes, they do.
moving forward.
You met Jonathan.
Anyways, we have important people in the room. Because what you're saying is like people can't have psychological cognitive dissonance, and it seems like actually it's like we have cognitive dissonance for a reason. Like it's rewarding, and no matter what person you are, you need cognitive dissonance to function.
Okay, you misunderstand. Cognitive
Yes.
dissonance is psychological pain that causes you not. That is caused by you not having a coherent view of how, like, part of what you do in counseling is help people resolve their cognitive dissonance. Correct, Ryan?
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Ryan is.
But I mean, to Trey's point, though, it's like, or I don't know if this is Trey's point, but like, the world is complex, and like, the more we become connected and like learn from all these different cultures and traditions and stuff, it's like it's not going to become less complex anytime soon. And like, just return to Torah, in my view, is just a version of the same thing. Just like pick a subculture and pick a tradition and just isolate to that and just kind of block everything else out. How is that a solution?
It's a solution because that's what God revealed from the very beginning, and it's true.
That's so sick. Oh my gosh. Hey, Sam, question. As a fellow Unitarian, how many times have you told people when you've pointed to the scriptures and literally say, Jesus did not know the day or the hour, and he's not the Son of God? And they go,
A lot.
a
I
lot,
mean,
right?
you
a
saw
lot,
me,
a lot, a lot.
like with you saw on Trent Horn. I mean, it's like I brought up that passage. I poked him a little bit. It's people are capable of extreme amounts of cognitive dissonance sometimes.
But it hurts.
I
It
don't think
does
it
hurt.
does.
Yeah.
That's what cognitive dissonance means, Trey.
Okay, well, because from the example I remember is that there was like, that they were studying basically apocalypticism, and one person said like there's going to be a huge flood, and if you guys get to this mountain, you'll all be saved. And basically the flood didn't come, and they wanted to see the reactions afterwards, and they reinterpreted it as basically saying no, it was like in heaven or whatever.
Right. So because of the psychological pain, you come up with ways of understanding and explaining things away. That is a coping mechanism you have because things or you have to create a narrative which can hold everything you believe and do, because you can't function without that. So the psychological pain of cognitive conflicts in your knowledge causes you to come up with weird explanations like the Trinity to try to make things work.
Or for
Okay.
Brendan Graham Dempsey, you have different lenses that you say, oh, well, I can have this thing over here and I can have this thing over here as a way to kind of separate it out. And Jordan Peterson has something kind of similar, but I think that he strives for integration. Like, Peterson would be like, well, I get the psychological, symbolic significance of the resurrection, right? I get that. Did Jesus walk out of the tomb? I don't know. But I think he wants to have a coherent answer. And I don't think he just wants to be able to toggle back and forth where like, oh, when I'm doing this thing, I think yes. And when I'm doing this thing, I think no.
Trey really thinks that's what I do. Like, he thinks I'm lying when I say I believe the world is 5,784 years old. And 6 months.
Why do you believe that number?
Date?
Why? Because that's the number that's on my parents' wedding document.
Isn't that well, anyways, we don't got to go into that back and forth. I think a better question, and since Sam's here, like, you talked to David Sloan Wilson, right, the evolutionary biologist, and he mentioned like the religion of the future is able to basically move through the scientific, that's able to use the scientific. And I guess I want to poke the idea of you saying cognitive dissonance, because it seems people can accept, yeah, these are just categories, and sort of act through them. Like, I think we do that every day. Like, I brought up two examples. We can disagree on them, but I feel like we'll have some agreements. Like, I would say gender and race, right? At the very least, a lot of parts of gender are performative. I think we can both agree to it. But just because it's performative doesn't mean that we don't do them and act as if we do them.
Did you see J.K. Rowling trying to define what a woman was on Twitter today?
No.
I mean, she was, and she gave an answer. It was like the gender that has the slower moving gametes or something like that.
Well,
a
that's
very
the scientific. That is the
that's
scientific
a
definition.
right, but it's interesting that it is a very she's resorting to the biological. And I don't know if this is what Trey is saying or not, but I agree that like I'm not sure if you can get your definition of gender. Like if biology might help you classify which gender someone is most of the time, but it's not the essence of what gender is, and it's not where gender comes from. And if anything, using biology as a way of trying to recognize gender, not define gender. And that I feel like that's a perfectly post-Platonic way of talking. And I think that in some sense you would agree, Jacob, that gender doesn't come from below, it comes from above.
Correct. Genesis 1:27.
Oh man, okay. I feel like gender is too controversial. I feel like we should talk about race.
That's less controversial.
So, what? Oh no, I feel like it is. What race is Obama? What race is Obama?
Hawaiian.
Good guess.
I would say slaver.
Okay, even better guess. We would say he's black, but we don't say no. Saying he's white is not the correct definition, right? And we're using a social term, and even then, like, there's debates in the black community that somebody could be like, they're acting white, so they're like presenting as white, or somebody's acting black, and like that shifts our identity of things. But you can't look under a microscope.
I think calling Obama black is not. I mean, it's incoherent. There's no reason to call Barack Obama black.
Why?
First of all, race is a pretty bad category to use at all. But his mom is white. His father is Kenyan aristocracy, right?
Mm.
So he's not a descendant of slaves. He's not African American in that way.
Yeah.
And his father's family probably sold the slaves that his mom's family bought. I mean,
okay. You're playing into my point. Okay, where's the cognitive dissonance of every single people? It seems like we're playing that story out. Even if if you ask people, they'll say no, that's not true.
Okay, Trey. The thing is, a human brain is not like a compiler that takes code, and if the code does, it recognizes that the code doesn't compile, it comes out with a 0 at you. That's not how it works. You have to yourself, as a human being, recognize that there is a conflict there. And that is actually what you really mean by cognitive dissonance, which is the human being who doesn't want to see. I mean, I did it with Duke, whose picture is over there, right? When I put him down, he was 35 pounds. That's 10 pounds below his wait. Because for 6 months, I did not want to see that I needed to put him down. Right?
Yeah.
And like the day I woke up and Happy's tail was wagging, I started crying. Why? Because I always told myself I would put Duke down when his tail stopped wagging. And when he was younger, every morning when I woke up, he would meet me with his wagging tail because that's what dogs do, right? But but I had decided I wasn't going to see that, right? That is, yeah, like human beings do that. But
Yeah, I mean, because modernity has convinced us that we like need to make sense of everything, but like we've never stopped to ask why. Because all ultimately we're trying to do is match our perceptions with our desired perceptions. Like that's what the brain, the body, the system is trying to do, right? And so like why are we insisting all the time on like trying to make sense of everything? Why aren't we asking what is the purpose at all of making sense of things? Right? And if you can start to ask that, it's like, okay, I don't have to make sense of categories like race. I have to make sense of them for some purpose. And what is that purpose?
yeah, but you do need that purpose. I mean, that's the problem with nominalism. Is
What do you mean?
saying it doesn't matter, modernity, right? It's like it doesn't matter. It's whatever. Like it is what it is, and there's nothing beyond it, right? And postmodernity trying to say like even what's real, it just doesn't matter. It's like that's how people. I mean, I feel really sorry for her, but the CEO of YouTube, former CEO of YouTube, so Susan
Wojcicki?
Wojcicki, yeah.
Yeah.
Her 19-year-old son was recently found at Berkeley overdosed.
On what?
They think fentanyl. The results aren't back yet.
Okay.
Doesn't appear to be. Hopefully, it's not a. It's not a. It wasn't deliberate, but either way, it's tragic. But yeah, you raise your children with nothing, and then you wonder why they have nothing.
Yeah. Okay. I guess. So you know how we talked about Big N. Also, I realized I scared Sam off. But you,
He had to go to bed.
oh, he did. Okay. Uh, you know how we talked about the difference between Big N and Little N Noahide?
I didn't know you were calling it that, but okay. I usually refer to muscular Noahide or non-muscular Noahide, but okay. What about it? Okay, so to explain for
Yeah.
people who are not in on this question, so the question becomes if there is a version of the Noahide, which is people who actually call themselves Noahide and who decide that they are going to, Garth says the new N-word, they decide they are going to adopt Judaism as their religion and identify themselves as Noahides versus people who are, let's say, faithful Muslims, which we would generally, Judaism would say they are Noahides.
I mean, I think there's more to that. Technically, what we're saying with Big Noahide is that you have to agree to more things in the Bible than someone with a big Little N Noahide. Little N Noahide is the question of what are the basics, like what makes you a Noahide, and Big N Noahide is like, okay, you believe all of Orthodox Judaism.
I mean, Yeah, look, the fact is, unfortunately, that we have not had Noahides for a good 2,000 years since Christians started murdering them, and so it's not well. All Muslims are Noahides. That's not evident. Like, if you're murdering people, you're not a Noahide. I don't care what you say you believe.
Or you're just a
Um,
bad Noahide.
what?
Or you're just a bad Noahide.
Yeah, actually, that's true. Um,
Okay. So, because I feel like I want to get a little deeper into this sort of discussion.
Are you still on cognitive dissonance or strictly on no-hides?
Because I think he's using cognitive dissonance as like a very larger term than I think it actually is, and he's sort of like explaining people's mental states
no,
without
you're
saying who they
using
are.
You are using pop psychology to understand, and you're talking to two psychology students, and you're just plain wrong.
Can
I
psychiatrists?
realize it's against your religion to know what you're talking about, but that doesn't mean I have to put up with it.
So I do have a question in relation to Trey's confusion, although it wasn't specifically in relation to Trey's confusion. What is the relationship between cognitive dissonance and dissociation?
Ooh. You want to take that, Mr. Professional Counselor?
I mean, my gut thought is like, because in some sense, all distress is like kind of cognitive dissonance, right? It's like we have competing desires, competing networks, however you want to think about it. And dissociation is like when you feel like you can't come to any kind of resolution and you kind of just disengage entirely. Or it's like instead of coming to a decision, you kind of just like go somewhere else, right? And so it's almost like a refusal to address the problem at all. Right.
Dissociation is a symptom of psychological distress, which may be caused by cognitive dissonance.
That's what I was going to ask as a follow-up is could they exist sort of in tandem? Again, I'm kind of okay.
What gets you thinking about dissociation, Sandy?
Family history and trauma. Like you said, but way too good at it.
Gotcha.
So when I was listening to the earlier discussion on cognitive dissonance and some of the debate around sort of its purpose and the validity of trying to maintain these places and deny its cognitive dissonance and all those things, it reminds me of some of the challenges that for going on off on Trey's, like Noah husband. I have a long history of sort of a weird position in the Christian church as to the Noahide things because when presented with opposing facts about the topics that have been in discussion, their position like your identity, who defines gender as what, who defines the place of each gender, whether gender is the biological or the, all of those things. So
Am
I
I
was
the only one
thinking
having trouble hearing Sam?
Well,
okay, the sound is better now. Oh man, it
It was
sounded
Trey's fault, as usual. Yeah, go ahead.
But yeah, I mean, I think, I mean, using this word very loosely, obviously, but I think we're very dissociative as a culture, right? It's like, again, it's like what I was trying to bring up earlier. It's like we're now being confronted with all these different perspectives, and most of us are very like unwilling to pick a side or pick a corner or pick a tradition or something. And so instead of trying to resolve the enormous amount of conflict, we just, I'm not going to deal with that. And we find ways to kind of just detach and just kind of float off into, this like, I can just see it all from above, which I think is maybe Jacob's critique of this whole metamodern thing. It's like, you can't see it from above. Like, you have to exist within something. Like, you are
Maybe a
existing
little bit
inevitably
of,
within something.
and I don't know if I'm right, but maybe a little bit of what he was getting at with, sorry, I have a little bit of difficulty saying this how I want to because I relate some of it to my ex and how he thought. But when Jacob was talking about how like you want to bounce back instead of so this era or this label or this whatever, so I'm going to jump back to that. But then we do that by jumping forward into, and there's this back and forth thing, and I see that in people, but it's like the hyper spiritualizing of things that you're trying to deal with in the more tangible expression of life, which is why I love Halakhic Man too. That whole talking about the different components and how the religious, I'm going to lose the terms now, Jacob, but he has the three divisions: the religious man, the cognitive man, and the Halakhic man, and we don't do well finding that place where actually where the halakha actually exists within us at peace. Like I almost see that as an excellent example of cognitive dissonance in a sense. We don't pick sides. We kind of ping to one side or the other, but in the course of picking it, we're still fighting with the other side. So we're always trying to integrate ourselves in a sense. But at least within the context I grew up in, which would be the Christian faith, there's not that kind of explanation of what that looks like. It's that whole, or maybe it was just the denominations I was in. There is this very sense of, okay, we've gone through these things, so we've separated it into this, and this. You put the interpretation on things of, well, God had a plan and he kept giving it to people and they kept failing. So therefore now he has done this and there's this line in the sand and you still can't do it, but you don't fall into that camp because there's this line in the sand. So you're going to fall into this camp and we're just going to do it all for you. And I'm like, I have actually gone through a ton of things. So when Trey talks about Noahides and things, I'm not experiencing cognitive dissonance with some of the questions that I have between Christianity and this place, or because I've been asking some questions throughout. But I do know what dissociation feels like, and I do recognize some of the labels that you're using with cognitive dissonance. And I'm going, this is a super interesting discussion and a really interesting description of what does and doesn't fit the different categories of thought, time, like modern, postmodern, like all of those things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because it's always painful if it feels like a threat, right? If for whatever reason it doesn't feel like a threat, then you're able to just go, okay, yeah, cool, interesting, all these categories, all these ideas, And I think that's why someone like Paul Vanderklay is good at like just exploring the whole thing, because for whatever reason he does have a deep sense of well-being, which I would attribute to his his religion, his Christianity. But a lot of Christians probably don't have that, right? They say they have that, they want to believe they have that, but in reality, there's no stability, there's no ground. It's just kind of like, I'm constantly having to prove to myself that this thing I claim to believe is my foundation is actually solid. And if you don't have that, it's very hard to have any sense of stability or well-being at all.
Wait, I think Paul's different though, because he's old. Like, but I mean, I think that's the key point, right? He'll be like, you could literally prove to me that orthodoxy is what Jesus wants, and I'm still gonna stay in my church. You could literally prove to me Muhammad, rode on that horse and I'd stay at my church, right? Like, I think it's a completely different move.
Or likely because he's Dutch.
But if you hear him talk about like heaven and the kind of future after judgment and that sort of stuff, it's like, I think he's come to a place. I mean, I'm not him, but like it sounds to me like he's come to a place where he's like, I trust God. I trust that God is good. I trust that God is going to make good decisions, and I don't have to stress about all the details. And like that's a
Well,
healthy place to be, no matter where you're at.
right, but have you heard about him talk about Calvinism? I mean, that's what they talked about with Sam and Dempsey. Is that when Paul talks about Calvinism, what he's really just saying is he's just talking about Christianity in general.
Right.
And I think that in reality, he doesn't. In reality, he's perfectly fine with that cognitiveness of Calvinism.
Right. And I think that's part of the point here is like the dissonance only matters if you're bothered by it.
Yeah,
Now, the modernist will scream and rage at that and say, no, you can't have an inconsistent position. You have to be logical. It's like, but none of us is, right? We're just not. And that's being logical and coming to perfectly logical conclusions about all of this stuff we're presented with in modernity. That's not actually what leads to health and well-being and a sense of peace, right?
yeah.
And I think that's the thing that's kind of maybe uncomfortable to admit, because we're so bought into this idea that like, oh, the way I'm gonna resolve my inner conflicts is to have a perfect framework that I can fit everything into. And it's like, I just don't think that's it. That's not the
And it,
move.
and it
Right.
never works out, right? Right? Like Kant failed, Nietzsche failed, right? Like any person who really tried to hammer it down, it never worked out for their life.
Yeah. And in my mind, that's kind of the shtick of metamodernism. I'm not super bought into it, but I think it's fun. It's like it's kind of it feels to me almost like a recognition of that problem and saying, okay, I can kind of play around with stuff without all the stress, because whatever I'm here to do and whatever is going to bring me well-being is not what we've been doing for the past several hundred years. And maybe we haven't figured out yet what it is, but it's not that.
So what is that? Where does that leave somebody? No, it's not going to frame. We're gonna. How does that help? If you okay, so like you're saying, so Paul deals with his Calvinism by not finding cognitive dissonance,
Yeah.
even though he sees that there's conflicting points.
Mm-hmm.
What creates that sense of well-being? Like for me, I'm good with God. Like I've had this long-term sense of no matter what else happens, I can't lose God. God is there. I've had him throughout my life. All this other stuff caused me a lot of conflict, but I got through it.
Right.
But without, like, what are people doing who are simply talking meta modern? And like, are they just simply substituting? Are they substituting a belief in something for something relational? Like, because like when I go back to Halakhic Man, got to reread it because it's not fresh in my mind. But like when I go back to reading through that in the book club, there's a way in which the cognitive man approaches life to give himself that sense of, okay, everything's all right in my world.
Mm-hmm.
And the same with the religious man. They're not the same thing. They're not coping in the same way. They're trying to find their way to God through a different process. And then when he starts talking about Halakhic man, the man who's more, he's able to not just draw from both, but he actually embodies both. This sense of it's a very unique kind of position and place.
Mm-hmm.
you tell this story to most people in the Dutch church, they'll go, that's Jesus. Jesus is the only halakhic man. He's the only person who is able to, there's a script that goes with it.
Yeah.
You have to say the words. You have to repeat the words, because if you don't repeat the words, like the air coming in and out of your mouth creates your okayness. Here are our 5 points of Calvinism. Here are this and that. Here are the things that we know. You feel the vibration of your voice saying these things. But I look at somebody like my ex, who was born into it, didn't just step into it and, at 30 years old like I did. There's deeper things than the words. There's deeper things. And like earlier, I don't even know why I'm thinking of this right now, but earlier Jacob was talking about somebody and the fire within. That this God's fire is within man. And I was thinking, I wrote in the comments, first thing that comes to my mind is deep comes to deep, where, the reaching up and the reaching down, touch, there's this sense of you touch, the God as he has placed himself inside us by his breath, touches God as he is outside of us. However, and all of that, that's true integration in a sense, but it's not me doing it. Not me as a person, it's God himself.
I mean,
I
as a
relate
Christian,
to that, or I respond to it, but I don't create it myself. And sometimes I think we're trying to create things.
yeah, the spirit is like the wind, right? Like Jesus tells Nicodemus, like the spirit is like the wind. We're not controlling it. We're not seeing it. We're seeing the effects of it. And when that spirit collides with a person and enters them and changes them, it's evident. You don't have to try to like prove it at that point, right? But very few people find this, whatever this experience is, whatever this state is. It's not, it's not as common. I mean, it's the pearl hid in the field, right? Like we are seeking this kind of experience and knowledge of God, but we have to seek it, right? And I mean, that's a Christian perspective, obviously, but like to the point from note 4 that Jacob was reading earlier, it's like, if you think that you can just sit here and go, I'm good, like, it's just not going to happen, God has to be sought.
Yeah, but it's that whole, I mean, I've said this a ton of times. There's this, I don't know, I write stuff. And I don't remember if I read this or if I just kept saying it because I responded to something. There's this whole sense of you have to seek God, but there's always that saying of I seek you, seeking me. Because as much as we are seeking God, even more than that, he is seeking us.
Mm-hmm.
And there's some of when I was even reading Halakhic Man, and Jacob can correct me if I'm like way off because I am Protestant raised, but there's this sense of, like the upward and the downward motion of, like seeking, of walking the walk, of doing all this stuff and being all this stuff. And I'm listening to some of this meta-modern stuff, and I'm going, you're trying to create something. You're not actually seeking. Mm-hmm. If you're seeking, you'll find, because God's seeking you. And Christians say that too, but then they need Jesus. And when you're somebody, when you're somebody that's not 100% certain of what that means, like I'm not like Sam, where I decided at some point I didn't anymore believe in. I literally tried to argue my way out of the church with God before ever I joined it. Like I sat on a hillside and I argued with him and finally said, okay, fine. This is what this is. This is where you want me. Fine. And I've done that for like, oh gosh. Yeah, okay, let's not say how long. Trey will call me old, which is true.
Sam has definitely struggled with his faith.
Yeah. And I have, I mean, in the sense that you try to talk to people who are, well, of course there's a Trinity. Well, of course Jesus is this. Well, of course the Holy Spirit means that. Well, of course. And I'm like, yeah, but and what do? I make a very weird small and Noahide in phrase definition because it's a big deal, but it's not a if there's any sense of cognitive dissonance that I feel in my identity, living between spaces of I, show up at church and I sign the stuff to my son, and I sent I sent the video of Trey and my discussion the other night to the guys in the CRC Voices as part of a comment on something that I there. And in the video, I'm talking about, like teaching Jacob about Jesus, my son, not this Jacob. He knows way more about it than I do. He can quote chapter and verse, even though I grew up in it. But literally, oh gosh, that's one of those don't say it words. But I mean, I really did teach him. And because he holds to that, and because of our relationship, I still talk to him in those terms, respecting who he is, and and give him weird explanations of why I'm looking at the Noahide laws, which is partly the Calvinists' fault because they got into this big argument, and started, talking Jesus and quoting the law. And I went, well, if I'm going to understand the law, I want to go to the experts. So let's just, let's just be honest about this. But there's places where a lot of the things that you guys are talking about actually feel dissonant, and places where I'm like, no, it's actually the opposite. It's very anchoring because it depends on coming at it honestly. I don't have a great position. I've never done door to door or like the churches suck at what some of the Latter-day Saints do. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
Trey was describing how you learn to gradually, step by step, increase a skill.
Mm-hmm.
We just did small groups, and you better go do this. And suck at
it could be too. I mean, people can develop that skill without still having a deep, profound belief that God is good, right? And in my mind, like,
my issue isn't saying that belief in God is good. I believe in God, no problem. It's what do you do with the whole Christian aspect of it?
Yeah.
Go to the door. Are you telling them you got to find Jesus or you're going to end up in hell? I don't do good with that. Never did. Nope. That's not me.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, it makes sense with where you're at too, because it sounds like, I mean, you do have, there's things that you have unresolved that you do feel conflict about, but there's some that you don't, right?
Yeah, and they come from different sources. But so I'm sorry because I'm taking time, and it is almost 1:00 here. I got to work tomorrow till 10 p.m.
There's no goal. We're talking about what we're talking about, right?
That's the problem is there are intelligent people here that I love this kind of conversation where you can actually discuss something without having a set script or a script you're arguing about. I mean, this isn't. Yeah. But I'm talking too much.
I mean, it gets to the point, though. I mean, it's a good example of the kind of conflict that happens in this age. And yeah, the metamodern thing is an attempt to resolve it. by saying, I don't know, I just won't care, maybe. Like, I don't know. I'm not saying it's a good approach, but it's the attempted approach.
And it doesn't work. It just doesn't work.
That's super dysfunctional. If my question coming in is correct, asking, so how is cognitive dissonance related to dissociation? I know where dissociation comes from, and I know that that's not good.
Mm-hmm.
And in cognitive dissonance, it probably, even with dissociation, you go into trauma therapy and they say to you, this is meant, you have this ability in your system to be a short-term coping mechanism until something resolves back into what it's supposed to be, and then you go on with life.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, if you design an entire thought pattern around cognitive dissonance, it's like, hey, let's just plan to dissociate for the rest of our lives. This is a good long-term plan. And I will be going, absolutely not.
Yeah.
It is a terrible long-term plan.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, I think it's helpful for me to think about all the psychobabble at like lots of scales. And so, like, at a super small scale, like, I dissociated earlier when Jacob was reading Halakhic Man because it was triggering a lot of thoughts. And so I had to stop and kind of float off and like think for a second and then come back. And that's like not a bad thing. I just had to like organize some stuff in my head for a moment, you know?
But that's probably the correct usage of that.
Right. And then it's like, okay, if you find yourself having to do that all the time and not able to make progress organizing and then come back, that's when it's a problem, right? And so many people, it's almost like, you raise a kid in Protestant church, he gets on the internet, he starts reading tons and tons and tons of stuff about the whole world, then he has to go dissociate, and then 10 years later he's still dissociated, that's when it's a problem. It's like, you can't live in that state, right? But what's the solution?
Well, move through it. I think that's the answer. Like, I think that, to be honest, Sam's gonna get mad at me for this, but to be a Unitarian Christian is sort of an absurd concept. If I'm being real with you, meaning that you have to basically say, for the last 2,000 years we got it wrong, but now we got it right. And if you're saying like you got that much wrong for that much long time, and it was a central key issue, and you're like, okay, yeah, but I think Christianity makes sense, then I think it's like, okay, if if you're able to swash out that much, like, how far can you go? How far can it go where it just works? What do I say? Yeah, all the Old Testament didn't happen, but Jesus was raised. Oh, all the Pauline letters weren't subscribed to him. Or I said, or I know I don't even think Jesus existed, but some dude rose from the dead. Like, I think, Jacob, I understand your pushback on all these ideas because what you really don't want is you don't want Reform Judaism. But I think the question for the next generation is, um, what is an argument for religion other than just the sort of modern frame? Because
How
I was
about
talking
it's
to,
true?
What the hell do you mean by true?
but you don't believe it's true, right? Meaning that like
Give a more clear word than it.
Matzah. Why am I eating matzah and not like bread? Why?
what do you mean? All of Judaism is true? Every little tittle, every single piece, every single claim?
I believe that God revealed the Torah to Moses on Mount Sinai.
Okay, but in that definition, there's 10 other definitions, right?
Correct.
Right? You're using the English language, you're using Mount Sinai. I guess
I don't believe that my concept of Judaism is true because I don't believe that I have a capacity to contain the infinite truth that is Judaism.
Okay. What if I said, I don't believe that the flat earth is true because I can't contain the idea of a flat earth existing.
You're just being silly.
So,
Why?
Trey,
Wait. Why?
But because the flat Earth idea is not some vast ocean like the Talmud is. Like, how many times do I have to tell the story of cracking my head on a page of Talmud?
No, but I know. But what you've just given me is you said, I believe it's true. And then you gave me a qualia description, right? You didn't say the Talmud has 222 characters and no other book has 222 characters. That's why it's correct, right? You didn't give me that description. Or anytime you use the Talmud, it always flies in the sky. That's why it's correct. Nothing else could fly in the sky. You're not giving me a modern argument. You gave me a qualia. You gave me an emotional argument.
Yes, I believe that God reveals himself to each individual person to the extent and capability that they have to understand him.
Okay. But when you say it's true, you're saying, I think it's true. Like you said yourself, you can't even say my perception of it.
Everything I
true.
say is what I think, Trey. That's all I can do is say that which I think.
Right. But okay.
Yes, I realize intellectual humility makes your brain hurt.
No, I'm saying intellectual, like the belief that we are like propositional robots is what I'm disagreeing with. And I think also what the Bible
You think
disagrees
I
with.
said we're propositional robots?
Well, you said, I know it's true,
The
right?
propositional matters. If there was no Exodus, if the Exodus didn't happen, then I should not believe in Judaism and I should not be eating matzah.
Okay. But you can say that,
Unless I like matzah.
right, but Abraham doesn't have to exist.
You can interpret. I don't believe that, but within the 4 cubits of halakha, as Rabbi Breitowitz made clear, a person who believes that Abraham is just a story is still considered an Orthodox Jew. And Rabbi Breitowitz has the authority to bind and loosen on earth as in heaven, and he has the keys in his hands, and he gets to say that.
Okay. Ryan, I feel like you should chip in here because I feel like you could be a third person in this conversation. But like
Ryan loves Rabbi Breitowitz.
so do I. Trey, I have a question. What does that make me? What does that say about what does that make me? Because I've said over and over. So I sat on a hillside, I argued with God about what people at the Bible camp were telling me about Jesus.
Yes.
He did not spend his time convincing me of what they were saying. Simply made a proposition. This is my plan. I want you to do this. End of story.
Right.
So I did.
I'm not
because I wanted to follow God. Okay.
I'm not trying to put people into categories.
Mm-hmm.
What I'm trying to say is that when Jacob uses these terms, he's not like, okay, could you did your whole halachak man, for blah blah blah. Could you read Psalm 72 for us? I believe that's the Doubter Psalm. It's the melody of Asaph.
Let Jacob finish chewing.
Because when I think of these conversations, I think of this psalm.
Okay. And I'm going to give you one other thing from my life that I think I might have mentioned to you on our conversation about autism.
Yes.
I can do that before or after Jacob reads Psalm 72.
I think it's Psalm 72. It's the melody of Asaph. It's the doubting psalm.
It's not. You are.
Oh, wait.
You got this wrong. I always have to look it up for you.
You do. Melody of Asaph.
73.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. Or
There you go.
all right.
Okay. מזמור לאסף. אך טוב לישראל אלוהים לברר לבב. ואני כמעט נטוי רגלי כעין שופכו אשורי. כי קינאתי בהוללים שלום רשעים אראה. כי אין חרצובות למותם ובריא אולם בעמל אנוש איננו ואם אדם לא ינוגעו לכן ענקת מו גאווה יעטף שיט חמאס למו. Why are you making me read about Hamas now? I have no idea. יצא מחלב עינימו עברו משקיעות
You can
לבב.
read it in English.
Oh,
I'll read it. How about that?
go ahead.
A Psalm of Asaph. Truly God is good in, what's that word?
To Israel.
To Israel. No such as are of a clean heart. But as for me, my feet were almost gone. My steps had well nigh slipped. Scroll down. For I was envious of the arrogant when I saw the prosperity of the wicked. For there are no pangs at their death. Their body is firm. There are no troubles as other men, nor are they plagued like other men. Therefore pride is their necklace, violence covers them like a garment. Their eyes stand out with fairness. They have more
Fatness.
than their heart could wish. I'm gonna flip it up so I can see better. Okay, there we go. They deride and wickedly speak oppression. They speak lawfully. They set their mouth against the heavens, and their tongue struts to the earth. Therefore his people return here, and abundant waters are drained out by them. And they say, how does God know? And is there knowledge in the Most High? Behold, these are the wicked. Always at ease, they increase in riches. Surely I've cleansed my heart in vain, and washed my hands in innocency. For all the days I have been stricken and chastised every morning. If I had said, I will speak, thus behold, I should have offended against the generation of thy children. So I pondered how I might understand this, but it was too wearisome for me, until I entered the sanctuary of God. Then I understood their end. Surely thou dost set them in a slippery place. Thou dost cast them down in destruction. How are they brought into desolation in a moment? They are untimely consumed with terrors. As a dream when one awakens, O Lord, on awakening, thou shalt despise their image. When my heart was embittered, and I was pitied in reins, then a foolish and ignorant I was, like the beast before thee. But I am continually with thee. Thou hold my right hand. Thou shalt guide my counsel, and afterwards receive to me an honorable state. Whom am I in heaven but thee? There is none upon earth that I desire beside thee. My flesh and my heart fail, but God is the strength of my heart, and my portion forever. For lo, they are from me, thee shall perish. Thou hast destroyed all those who go astray from thee. But as for me, the nearness of God is my good. I have made the Lord God my refuge, that I may relate all thy works. Okay, what was the point of that?
Why would you
Literally,
call that doubter psalm?
what?
Why would you call that the doubter psalm?
Because it caused him to doubt.
No, that's the opposite. That's like
No, I mean it does describe doubt.
does.
And I think there's a part in the psalm, I don't know how it was translated, but it's mentioned, I did not go to my friends, I did not burden them with my desires, but I went to the temple. In that psalm, literally, he goes from someone, I don't believe any of this is true, I don't believe God is good, goes to the sanctuary, and then completely flips around. Does that, he didn't believe Orthodox Judaism was true. For 6 hours, he didn't believe it was true. And then he went back.
Okay? He had a revelation. God revealed himself to him.
And can you scroll down to the very last verse,
Only if you ask nicely.
please? The nearness of God is my good. Yeah, exactly. It's like he had this conflict, and then he went to the sanctuary of God. He experienced God. He put himself in the presence of God according to the way God commanded, and then he was near to God and he realized the resolution to his problem, which wasn't that he needed to see the resolution happen in front of him. He just realized the way God works and saw that God is near and that God is good, and that was his resolution, which is not a propositional thing necessarily, right? There are propositions involved, but it's not primarily propositional. It's primarily experiential.
Right. But that's what I mean by, like, this person doesn't believe Abraham exists, but this person believes Moses existed. Right? Like, I just don't think when you say, like, Judaism is true. Okay. Which understanding of Judaism is true? Are we saying a minimal idea of Judaism is true? What part does its trueness mean? And I understand you want, like, we need gatekeepers. We don't want Reform Judaism. I agree. But I think I look at the song and it seems like, wow, it literally is flipped in us like on a dime. He didn't even explain what happened in the sanctuary. He just said, I went to the sanctuary, and then whoop-de-doo, it was all good. Do you understand what I
Right.
mean, Jacob?
Right. Yes and no. Like, as I have said 1 billion times over, every single religion calls itself a path. You have to walk down the path, and it's your individual path.
Right, but I can, like, when you say something is true, right? Like, it is true that I am 6'3"
Okay?
right?
Well, it
And
is
I know that way more than I like, and I can prove that way more easily than I can that my path is right.
that's because it's a fact that you are 6'3". And in writers group, they always tell us, don't let the facts get in the way of truth. Facts and truth sometimes will argue. And that's the other thing I was going to ask you about. I talked to you about Jacob's language when
Yes.
when I was pregnant with him, when, I talked to God about him, and about the waiting for language. So that's why I said, what does that make me? Because my entire life has been about willingness to live in the wait for it, in the I don't know, but. And that's why when you ask Jacob, how does this make Judaism true? It makes it true because that is what God told the Jews to do, to be for him. It was how he had asked them to live their lives out, same as he asked me to go and sit in a church and to worship with a people that I said, I'm not a great evangelist because I can't go and tell people this stuff. And then he gives me a kid and says, hey, like, I literally had this tactile vision of what Jacob was going to bring to my life. And I said no. Again, I argued with God, but every time I argue with God, in the end, it's just me venting about what I know I'm going to do anyway. So which is true? Me arguing and the fact that my argument implies I don't believe or I don't want to do something? Or is it simply part of the process of going ahead and doing and of being the completion of the truth? I mean, I'm having conversations with this kid that the whole span of my life has been about. And I go down to his group home and I say, oh my gosh, he's asking me questions. Like, I mean, I don't mean he's just copying a question word. I mean, he is formulating questions of things he wants to know, and he is asking me and challenging me about them. And that only took 30-something years to accomplish. So which was true when I agreed to do this? The fact that he would have language and I would get to see it immediately? The fact that I didn't want to do it? The fact that I'm witnessing evidence of that conversation and that life and that living it out? Because in some respect, all of it's true. Even the stuff that doesn't look true, if you only look through a microscope at certain portions of something and you don't trust God for the wide view. So what does that make me? Some people would say crazy, but I'm not really.
What do you think it makes you, Sandy?
Happy. Loved. I feel very loved by God. And that probably does make me crazy, because this is the kid that his dad used to trigger him so bad he could have killed me a couple of times. I've had his hands around my throat. I've had a pillow on my face. I've had bite marks that go to the bone and show up a year later. So what is actually true? Who is he that God gave him to me to raise?
If you
What
feel happy,
that makes me happy.
if you feel happy and you feel loved and you have relationships and you believe in God and you trust God and you're still working out what it all means propositionally, that doesn't sound like a bad position to me.
No, it makes me very blessed.
I guess I keep going back to this question of like, it's not that I don't care what's true, but like, what is truth serving?
God.
I know it's good for its own sake, but like, you know, in the whole Vervaeke project, it's like we are not capable of grasping even 0.01% of 0.01% of the facts. You know, I can't know even a tiny bit of the information about this cup I'm holding.
Yeah.
But that's not what it's about, right? Like, I don't need to know the information about the cup. I just need to be able to use it and to do it and to drink from it. And it's like, in some sense, that's how all of life is. It's like we're not going to understand most things, you know? And like the fact, if we make that our benchmark for like, I can't be happy until I understand all things, like, well, damn, dude, you're going to be miserable.
Yeah.
So, this is one of the verses I really like to throw at Christians. Daniel 12:12. Happy is he who waits and reaches 1,335 days. But go thou thy way till the end be, for thou shalt rest and stand up for thy allotted portion at the end of the days. I could point to Psalms and many other places, but happy is he who waits.
And you say that to Christians who have an expectation that they should, boom, experience joy in this moment?
Have you heard of my $5,000 challenge?
No.
Okay. Oh no. Good night, y'all. Good night.
My $5,000 challenge, which is not my $5,000 challenge, but I will actually give the $5,000 to anyone who meets this challenge, which is show me any one prophecy of the Messiah that Jesus uniquely fulfilled. And Father Stephen DeYoung came on my channel, and this is one of the most popular videos.
I remember this. Was this like 2 years ago, maybe? Year and a half?
I don't think it was that long ago. It was more like a year, but like,
Okay.
yeah. And he's like, yeah, you're not going to be able to do that. Like, just give up. Jacob's not going to lose that $5,000. Right?
Okay, so what's the connection to why'd you bring this up in relation to what we're talking about?
Because people ask me, what's the best attempt anybody has made? And the best attempt anybody has made is actually this prophecy at the end of Daniel. But the prophecy is all about waiting. Like, gives you a prophecy and it says, wait.
Well, Christians are waiting.
Are they?
We're supposed to be.
Until I learned the word preterist from Sam Tideman. I can say to Christians, you're not going preterist on me, are you? And if they know what that word means, but they will adamantly tell me, but the Messiah has come. And Jesus fulfilled hundreds of prophecies. Like, show me one. One. Go right ahead. Like, I would love to be convinced that the Messiah has come and Jesus is the Messiah. Do you know how much easier my life would be if I could be a Christian? My channel would be so much bigger if I were a Christian. I jokingly talk about, like, if I really wanted to, I could, like, do this whole arc on my channel where I would say, like, I decided to get baptized.
Yeah, get in on the kind of wave that's happening right now.
Yeah, it's like, oh, I decided to get baptized just to make the money, and then Jesus really appeared to me. Like, I would be on Chosen People Ministries and One Israel in 2 seconds.
Yep.
I would have best-selling books, right?
Yep.
Books written by some Christian, right? I would be wealthy. It would be wonderful. So, like, why don't I do that?
Why don't you do that?
You can't do that.
True.
That's not just why.
Yeah, it is. It's not true.
It's because you believe in the Bible and because you believe in God and because
I believe
there's a moment in life.
Because I am searching for truth.
Right.
And if the Torah, if it turns out that there was no Exodus, if I really believed that there was no Exodus, I would have to find me a new religion.
And if Jesus appeared to you and you believed it was true, the last thing that you would do would be get rich off of it, because that is not you. It's not how you do things.
What if Jesus appeared to you on the road, Jacob, and said, hey, the Exodus wasn't true, but I rose?
No.
I don't believe in miracles.
Seriously? You don't believe in miracles?
I do believe in miracles. I don't believe miracles prove anything.
Well, their purpose may be not to prove things, but they do exist.
I mean, it is in a way kind of miraculous that Chezi gets to live in Jerusalem, but I don't believe that's a miracle from God.
Yeah. I guess it depends what you mean. Like, I mean, I just threw my story of Jacob's language at Cray, saying, what does this make me that I'm willing to wait and believe something? People would probably say it was a miracle if it happened within a split second, of the first time somebody brought it up. That's what people think miracles are. But I don't think that that's necessarily what they are. I mean, the whole wait thing, that's a big component of miracles.
I just think it's funny that people are going to come here for Sam Tideman and Metamodernity, and they're going to be hearing me, like, read from Halakhic Man and talk about Noahides.
Love Halakhic Man.
The man was a prophet. The man was an absolute prophet. And when Elijah came and wanted to do this as the book club, I was like, what? Like,
I mean, when you were reading that earlier, I mean, I have no context here, but like, it sounded like a pretty good diagnosis of some stuff.
Oh, I mean, no, or there's, I mean, yeah, philosophically, it's dynamite, but this is kind of an autobiography of sorts, and like, he's talking about going to synagogue with his uncle, and like, he's talking like, this is so deeply Jewish. I could not understand how Gentiles were reading it at all. Like, we were having our weekly sessions, and
In terms of like, you don't understand why they'd be interested or why they would.
No, I don't even understand how they could understand the context of the things he was talking about.
On his channel, you can go and check it.
Yeah.
I mean, you can check that we had a book club for the entire thing, and for like the book club, even though I wasn't rereading it, I was showing up just to explain the Jewish concepts.
Yeah.
And like most Jews, like Orthodox, even modern Orthodox Jews who go to Yeshiva University, I doubt most of them have read this.
Yeah.
Like graduates of.
Well, I mean, like if the rest of the book is like that excerpt you read, I mean, I can imagine that would be very refreshing even for someone like me, because it's like, it sounded pretty sane, you know? It sounded pretty like, okay, someone's just saying it how it is, and not for any ulterior motives, but just like, yeah, what's going on? Why are we pretending? Why are we so schizophrenic or so bipolar, or however you want to frame it? Like, why do we act like, why do we have these different modes of being that are not integrated well together, even though they claim to be the ultimate mode of being? It's like, it doesn't make a lot of sense.
Wow, this originally was printed in 1944. What can I say? The Rav was the Rav. There's a reason why he's known as the Rav.
It's a good read. It's available on what is that? Archive.
Yeah, it's available free. The PDF is available for free.
Yeah, Internet Archive or something, I think it is.
And I haven't actually read the original. Yeah, I haven't read the original Hebrew. I don't
Andrew,
know.
what do you think about metamodernism?
I mean, I don't know. I don't know much about it. It seems to be word salad. I don't know. It's like, I don't know. It's like, I don't know. It seems like the only way it can frame itself is in relationship to modernity, post-modernity, whatever.
And that was kind of Sam's point earlier. He's like, don't give me another thing that's like a response to a previous thing. Like,
Yeah.
we've been down this road so many times. Like, let's just stop.
Yeah.
Oh, yawning starting. 1:15. I should behave myself and say thank you very much for talking to me, guys, and let Andrew take over.
Thanks, Andy.
I'll see you, Sandy.
Yeah, I don't really have skin in the game with the whole metamodern thing. I don't know. I'm glad people are at least open to considering that we're like entering some new phase and we should try to call it something and figure out what it is.
Well, that's what talking about postmodernists, like the people who consider themselves postmodernists, that's what they're trying to do. It's just postmodernism offers nothing, but it's a solvent. It's a critique. It's not a.
Yeah.
Doesn't actually offer any solutions.
I don't know. So, why are you doing streams on Judges, David?
Why am I doing streams on what?
Judges. David. Or Ryan. Ryan. Wait, am I mixing up people? David's the person that's doing streams on Judges.
What is he saying?
Streams on Judges, the Book of Judges.
Oh, David Busatil is doing Judges because he likes Judges.
Okay. Who is he?
He's a Christian who spent a lot of time studying Judaism, and I had some very interesting discussions with him early on. He has a house church. He's pretty knowledgeable about the Torah and Hebrew and stuff. And yeah, I generally am supportive of Christians like studying the Bible.
Who would have thunk it?
Yep.
Yeah. Man, so like, this is gonna be a really weird question. But like, the bits that the Samaritans add to like their Bible, like, what do you
Yeah,
feel?
they're hilariously funny. Like they have an 11th commandment in the Ten Commandments.
Mhm.
You shall worship on Mount Gerizim.
No. But I mean, like the non-sectarian bits, you know, the stuff that's just like.
I'm not aware that their non-sectarian bits are in any way interesting.
Okay. Right.
I have not heard of anybody actually pointing to the Samaritan Pentateuch and there being anything interesting in there. If there is, I mean, I'll be glad to know more about it.
Let's go. Dude, I think I should just like collect biblical Pokemon. You know, I should like study all of the Samaritan editions. I should talk to all these Mandaeans.
I have
should-
heard theories which I have no stake in whatsoever that the Samaritan Bible was actually created around the 9th century by taking the Masoretic text and editing it.
Bruh,
Yeah.
that sounds like an unbased take right there.
Do you understand what these young people are talking about, Ryan?
Not really. I don't care anymore.
Man.
I tell myself I don't care, but I secretly care a lot. You know.
Yeah. One of the interns, I was at my internship today, and I said something. He's like, "Jacob's really out of pocket." I had to look it up.
I work for this like massive company, and they've been sending out like these emails about like security information, like trying to train us to like not fall for phishing scams and stuff. And they sent out one today that was all in like Gen Z slang, like trying to be cute. And like I think they knew it was pretty bad, but it was pretty bad. It's like, what are we doing here? Like, I don't know.
Yep.
But I mean, Gen A's coming up, and
Oh God.
you know, they're a whole thing, which is interesting.
Not Gen ZZ. Not Gen.
They're calling it Gen Alpha, and it's like they're like Gen Z's sense of humor is actually pretty funny to me because it's very like self-aware irony kind of stuff. It's like absurd, but also mocking itself in its absurdity. It's pretty clever. But like the Gen Alpha stuff is just like bizarre for the sake of bizarreness. There doesn't really seem to be any rhyme or reason to it at all, which is kind of interesting. It's almost like those kids' minds are just like total mush, and there's just like nothing to, you know, like the skibbity toilet stuff. It's like if that's where we're headed, like it's gonna be a weird world, man. Have you seen Skibbity Toilet, Jacob?
Oh God. Livy done rizzing up baby Gronk. Skibbity Toilet only in Ohio.
It's a YouTube series. Each one's maybe like 30 seconds or 2 minutes or something, and it's just like monster fights between like big toilets with heads coming out of them.
Yes,
And like robot laser guys. And
yes.
but there's like a lot of lore to it. Like you gotta pay attention and like it's complicated. It's complex.
I think Andrew has
Really?
has or someone introduced me to it. Maybe Trey. I don't know. Yeah, I had no clue what it was going.
But yeah, I mean, if you ever meet any like, I don't know, like 11-year-olds right now, they'll just be kind of like randomly flailing and like saying words like skibbity, totally out of context. It's like there's nothing that is like cohering their thoughts or their humor together at all, which is like, it's sad, but it's fascinating, kind of. I don't know. Like, I'm sure people are studying it right now.
Sorry, but I'm getting texts at 10:30 from somebody.
Yeah, I think that's probably time for me to go to bed.
Bad?
Yeah.
Fine.
Yeah.
You may go to bed.
All right. Have a good night.
I think I'm going to end the stream unless Andrew, you have something interesting to say.
No, nothing. I mean, I missed most of the stream. Did anything of note happen?
There was a lot of discussion. You can watch the stream.
That sounds like enough.
I mean, when Sam was on, it was very interesting, I thought. But Sam's always interesting. I've decided he's the new Moses in this locale. Nobody's going to actually listen to me, but if people listen to me.
I don't know what he's. Okay, all right. I don't know.
You don't know what?
I don't know. He does what? Mostly biblical scholarship, right? I mean, that's. I mean, like, yeah, that's cool, but it's been done before.
Well, I mean, I have to say his discussions about AI are incredibly interesting. His engagements with Vervaeke have been very interesting. His appearances on various other channels, including Muslim channels, I think has been interesting. He is incredibly smart, well-read, and just generally a really great guy. I'm a huge fan. Him, Grim Grizz, and Chad are like the 3 channels that I am very supportive of that are active.
Man.
Woman.
I kind of miss like first wave Peterson, you know?
You would like him to do that again, you mean? Or you didn't actually listen?
No, I mean I caught first wave Peterson. But I miss it, you know?
I see.
Yeah.
And you want somebody to be like that for you?
Yeah, kind of.
Yeah, well, you're going to have to stop being so lazy and actually dig into the Bible. Bruh. Lord of Spirits doesn't do it for you?
I don't watch Lord of Spirits much. When there's I honestly skim the episodes. I skim the playlist for like titles that pop out at me. So yeah,
Yeah, I can understand that.
I've been going through Whole Counsel of God.
How's that been?
It's pretty good. Yeah.
Okay. Sounds good. Okay, I am going to end the stream.
Okay.